guys, welcome to level 5. What I'm going to do in this 15 or 20 minutes is just introduce you to the SSP5014 Strength and Conditioning module. I'm going to cover things like the S&C teaching team, the teaching schedule, and some of the module assessments that you're going to experience this year. So, level 5. Moving on from level 4, what we're going into is more detail in everything we cover. So the theories and the strength and conditioning modalities aren't really going to change from level 4. We're just going to start to cover them in more detail. So you're expected to understand the reasons why. For example, rather than just, can you name the 4 plyometric mechanisms? Now, can you actually start to explain them? Okay, so you're going to advance your knowledge that you start to gain in level 4. One of the big changes this year, certainly from a practical point of view, is rather than just focusing on health and safety demonstrations and the technical model, this year we need to start to get you to learn how to coach. So one of the biggest changes is we need to develop your ability to actually identify movement errors and come up with movement solutions. Within that, we need to develop your pedagogical skills. It's no point knowing exactly what you need to change if you can't actually interact with the athlete and make the change. So throughout your practicals this year, you're going to experience time when you can actually coach in small groups or coach in pairs and start to develop these pedagogical skills. How can I cue somebody to make a change? How do people learn? Where do I stand when I'm talking to a group? These are really key kind of skills for the strength and conditioning roles that you may want to go into in the future. And finally, tying that all together, we want you to learn how to apply all of these skills into the development of specific S&C training programs, and we're going to see your ability to do that in the different assessments this year, both in the coursework, Mahara tasks, and in the practical assessments that I'll cover later on in this introduction. Into the S&C teaching team, you've met us all before, more than likely. You've got myself as module leader, Jason Pedley, Joseph S. Formez, Tom Matthews, and Zach Gold are going to be doing the majority of the teaching this year. You'll see Rob and Rodri as and when in specific practicals or certainly in assessments. Everybody's emails down there as well. If you're going to miss a lecture that you know one of the specific teaching teams going to be delivering that, just ping them an email. It's just polite so that they know who's going to be there and who's not. Anything else, I'm probably your first port of call as module leader this year. Okay, when are the lectures? So your lead lectures are now moved to the Friday. So Scram, you're on Friday 2 till 3 in LT1. And SES follows that 3 till 4 on the Friday in the same room, LT1. Depending on what practical group you're in, everybody has their practicals on a Tuesday now. They run for an hour and a half, 9 till 10:30, 10:30 till 12, 1 till 2:30, and then there's an extra Scram group, 2:30 till 4. Okay, check your timetables. They'll let you know exactly which practical group you should be in. Any issues, let me know. We'll probably get them sorted within the first week. Depending on what you're covering, you'll either be in the Scram gym or in the infield. Scram students, you're going to start in the Scram gym this year, covering most of the kind of gym-based stuff first, while the SES guys are covering the field-based stuff. And then after Christmas, we're going to switch over. So into the specific teaching schedule, you can see on here what we're going to cover in term 1 for both Scram and SES, with the lead lecture based around the practicals as well. You'll see that we're designating specific time slots to discuss the RIT1 case study. Okay, so you're going to have certainly a lead lecture in term 1 based on this RIT1 case study, so you can ask any questions, so I can make sure you're all on the right lines, so this piece of work's to the best of your ability. And then moving forward into term 2, you'll see again kind of the first practical slot. We're going to have a bit more of a group discussion based around how you're getting on with RIT1. Are you on the right lines? So you've got no excuses this year not to make sure this is the best piece of work. You're going to have an assessment prep week before we break up for Easter as well. And that will be based around the specifics of what's going to be covered in the practical assessments post-Easter. We can tie up any questions about Mahara at that stage. Following the Easter break, we've got this enhancement week. What we're going to try and do is get Andy Kelly or Andy Miles in on that lead lecture time slot to talk to you about work-based learning, which you guys need to think about for next year, getting your placement. In the practicals that week, we're going to have this mock kind of practical assessment. Really, really key for you guys. You can come in, you can experience although you already will have done one practical post-Christmas, you can just be kind of put under the spotlight. Again, get some really good feedback from us, and it will be really beneficial for you guys moving into the following 2 weeks when you've got your practical assessments. Okay? So moving into the module assessments, what we've got this year is 5 assessment points, and it may seem like quite a lot, but I'll explain kind of how it's going to work in more detail now. So your RIP1 case study is going to make up 40% of your final grade. We're still doing the Mahara portfolios, which make up 20% of your final grade. And then the practicals this year have been split into 3 different practicals, and they are worth 40% of your final grade. So if we have a look at more detail, the RIP1 case study, as I said, worth 40% of the overall module grade. It's basically a case study based on interpreting data, critically evaluating training methods, and then designing a training program for an athlete and being able to justify why you have come up with that training program. So what's going to happen is you're going to be given a data set of a specific athlete with certain benchmarks for you to compare him or her against. So what you're going to need to do is look at those athletes' scores and decide whether the benchmarks that are proposed, which one is the limiting physical component. So, for example, we might have a load of testing scores for a female rugby player. We've got 1RM strength, 1RM squat, 1RM bench press, medicine ball throw distance, 10 metre speeds, 40 metre speeds, some kind of T-test, change of direction speed score, and an isometric mid-thigh pull, where we've got rate of force development and peak force. And you might identify that it's actually her 1RM squat that's quite weak, because if you look at against the benchmarks, all her other scores are above the benchmarks, but the squat is below. Okay, we're going to keep it pretty simple. From that, once you've identified which is the limiting physical component, you need to look at what are the available training methods to improve that physical component. So if we've got 1RM back squat, what are some of the training method options that you can start to develop lower body strength? And there's some of the things we're going to cover this year in your league lectures and have discussions around in your practicals. Okay, but this is where you need to get your head into the journals, start to look at what research has looked at with certain training methods, make sure you have evidence, make sure you reference, and start to build up this critical evaluation of the pros and cons of certain training methods, which will make it a lot easier for you when you've designed your training program to actually justify the inclusion of certain things. So once you've done that evaluation of the training methods, you're going to have to design a training program, and you'll need to design a 6-week overview. So what in those 6 weeks, what were the training methods that you were going to use? Were you going to block it doing a 3-week of one, 3-week of another? How many sessions in a week were you going to have? Where were the deload weeks fitting in? What's the anticipated volume? What's the anticipated intensity? And this idea of kind of forming a training overview or a microcycle or macrocycle will start to make more sense throughout this year as you cover these in your periodization lectures. What we also want you to do is demonstrate an understanding of putting together a single training session, including a warm-up, main exercises, accessory exercises, what are the sets, reps, rest periods, and that's something else that you need to put together for this case study. Once you've done those, you need to justify why you did that. Why did you use supersets to develop lower body strength? Or why did you start to use cluster training? Why did you have a yoga press-up in your warm-up? Okay, and that's all the things you need to start to justify based on your athlete's sport, their training age, their training history, their injury history, all that will be made available to you on Moodle as we go through this year. Like I said, we're going to have designated lectures to discuss the RIP1 to make sure you're on the right lines. And then the final submission deadline is before 1 o'clock on Friday the 23rd of February. Okay, this is ripped straight from the module guide. Make sure you download the module guides. All the information about your assessments and things are in there in a lot more detail. So please, 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 before you start to email me about specific assessment points, make sure you've checked in the module guide first. Okay, but this is a breakdown of your RIP1 case study. So an introduction, what you're going to put in the introduction. Then there's this review of literature, your critical review of different training methods, into the training plan, and and then the justification of the training plan, and then you're still getting percentages this year for your referencing and spelling. So make sure they're proofread. Make sure you complete your work in enough time that you can actually sit down, proofread it, and try not to drop any marks for silly spelling mistakes and things like that. Okay, but this is a breakdown of it. With the breakdown, you can start to see which are the main sections. So this review of literature is massive. And like it says in italics, attention will be paid to the use of peer-reviewed literature. So make sure you make yourself used to using MetSearch. Make sure you start to look at these journal articles, and you can start to come up with real good evidence for the statements you're trying to make. Okay, but this is quite a clear structure or suggested content for you to start your RIT 1 once we've got through some of this term. Moving into the Mahara portfolio. So exactly the same process as last year. The Mahara portfolio is online. There's a separate one for Scrum and SES because you have different tasks at different times because you're covering different things. So make sure you download the right one. It's worth 20% of the overall module grade again. There's 20 portfolio tasks that are all going to be linked to the lead and practical lectures, exactly the same as last year. The overall grade is based upon the number of completed on time and the quality of the work. Last year, it was just the number of tasks completed. This year, there is a specific completion date for every single task. Make sure you look at when they're due in, and you need to upload your completed document onto Mahara. You don't need to submit it through Turnitin until the very end. But before that deadline comes, make sure you have uploaded it to your Mahara portfolio. If it is late, you will not be given marks for the completion of it. It will still be available to judge the quality of your work, so if it is late, make sure you still do it, and do it to the best of your ability. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote engagement, weekly engagement. The reason why we brought these tasks in is to make sure you're starting to do more independent study, and that if we don't have a completion date, what happened last year, and the students have said this themselves, the level 5 students last year fed this back to us and said they want a completion date on it, because if there's not, they leave them all to the last minute. They'll do them in April, the day before it's due in. That's not what these are about. If you stay engaged with the process, all these tasks will become a lot easier, and you'll start to see the real benefit of why we're doing these tasks. So make sure you have a look at when these specific tasks need to be due in, and make sure your specific documents are uploaded to the Mahara portfolio by this point. Not uploading the Mahara portfolio to Turnitin until the very end. Okay? Final submission for this, when you do upload it to Turnitin, again, is before 1 o'clock on the Friday, 20th of April. The specific task, this is just an example. This is for the Scrum group. The SES guys have a little bit of a different structure to theirs because of what they're covering. But you can see there is a completion date and time on there that they have to be uploaded to your Mahara portfolio before 1 o'clock on that specific day. If not, you don't get that mark for completion. Okay, any questions about that, let me know. Your practical assessment, so a little bit different to last year. Last year you just had one practical assessment. This year, because we need you to know more, you're in level 5, there's 3. Okay, there's one pre-Christmas, and that is basically going to be on the practical stuff that you covered in that term. So Scrammies, you'll be assessed on any of the gym-based stuff. SES guys, you'll be assessed on the field-based things. Okay, the second assessment post-Easter is going to be assessed on the stuff you covered in term 2. So SES, gym, Scram, field. Third practical assessment is a weightlifting competency assessment, and that is going to be, there's going to be a time in the exam period, so after Easter, a specific day in the exam period where we all come in and you get assessed on your weightlifting competency. Okay, into a bit more detail. Pracs 1 and 2, so your first 2 pracs based on the gym-based and the field-based things you've covered in the practicals. They are coaching pracs this year. So you will need to identify another student that you can bring in, preferably not a student studying level 5 strength and conditioning. Bring them with you to your 15-20 minute time slot. And in that, you're going to have to introduce the exercise, provide a short demonstration of the exercise, and then get that athlete or student doing that exercise ASAP. Identify the errors. What are they doing wrong? And then the most important thing is fix it. Make them better. You might have to move away from the start exercise. The exercise you pick out the hat is just your starting point. If you pick overhead squat, after 3 reps you think, no, there is absolutely no chance these guys are going to be able to do an overhead squat. I need to take them out because they've got this error. Start working on that. Okay? Again, we'll have meetings throughout the year to make sure this is very clear what you need to do. That's the same for Prac 1 and Prac 2. bring a student/athlete with you, preferably not one studying level 5 strength and conditioning. You will need to coach them this year. Okay. Prep 3 in the weightlifting competency. We all come in, you have a time to warm up, you get weighed in whatever you're going to wear for the weightlifting assessment, minus your shoes. You have a 15-minute warm-up time once you've selected your lift out of the hat, so you're either going to get clean and jerk or you're going to get snatch. Warm up with that exercise, and then we'll get going in the form of a kind of small weightlifting competition. What that means is you'll get 3 attempts to lift as much load as possible with the best technique you can, and you'll be given a mark based on 50% of the load lifted relative to body weight, and then 50% based on your technique, where us lecturers will use the kind of weightlifting checklist to mark off what you do well and what you do poorly, and then we'll give you a mark based on that. Okay, so 50% of your mark will be based on the load lifted relative to body weight, 50% based on technique. You should have access to the technical model from last year. If not, they'll be made available to you again on Moodle. And the loads lifted in relation to your body weight, they're on an Excel document in Moodle. So you can see exactly, if you weigh this much, you need to try and lift this much in this lift to get this mark. Okay? Please guys, if there's any questions, let me know. I'm teaching you in the first week, so once you've watched this short introduction to the module and downloaded and read the module guide, come along to that Friday first lead lecture with any questions you've got related to the module, and we'll get it all sorted then. Alternatively, I'm teaching the Scrum guys on Tuesday in the practicals, so I'm sure I'll see you then. Hopefully you'll have a really good year, guys. Any questions, let me know. Any issues related to the module, come to me and we'll get them sorted straight away. Okay, see most of you on Tuesday, and I'll see all of you on Friday.